Hey folks, today's episode of Transcending Comics was originally recorded as a Patreon bonus episode. Eri and I got together to review The People's Joker from Vera Drew, and we absolutely loved the film so much that we saw it in back-to-back shows. But at the time of recording, this wasn't publicly available anywhere outside of a very limited theatrical release, and we didn't want to encourage any piracy of a movie we loved so much. But we've decided to release this now because the movie is available for purchase on DVD, Blu-ray, or a VHS, and a special edition purple VHS tape at that. Also, I'm going to be off at FlameCon promoting both the podcast as well as my comic, When We Transform, which is currently sitting at 75% on Kickstarter and has been listed as a campaign they love. So please, if you're hearing this, one, go buy The People's Joker. There are spoilers ahead, but this movie is super worth seeing, spoilers or no. And support When We Transform, because I've spent plenty of time talking about comics, and I'd really like to change things up and start making my own. And you can help make that dream a reality. So enjoy the review, and hopefully I'll see you at FlameCon. Welcome to Transcending Comics, a podcast dedicated to trans representation in comic books, manga, and webtoons, both on panel and behind the scenes. I'm your host, Tommy, and joining me today once again is my literary expert, fashion consultant, and partner, Eri. Welcome back to the show.
Hey!
Today, we're once again taking a look at media outside the realm of print comics with a discussion about The People's Joker, a comic book parody film and trans reimagining of the Joker's origin story that's now being screened in select theaters across the United States. Eri, I know you and I just got out of seeing the film a second time just about 2 hours ago now, and I think it goes without saying that you and I are both big fans of the movie already.
Very big fan, yeah.
Yeah, tell us a little bit about your initial thoughts on the film.
Oh, wow. So it's one of those, I love movies and I hear a lot about movies. So I'd been hearing about it for a minute, and it was one of those of like, I really wanted to see it and kept hearing really good things. But whenever I would see the previews for it or hear about it, I'd always kind of be like, oh, it just kind of looks like a feature length, like YouTube segment or something, you know, like a YouTube essay or something, where no, like, again, this is my second time seeing it. I can't highly recommend enough seeing it in the theater. I think what blew me away the most is, you know, I was expecting something very handmade, like a YouTube video or something, and I got like a full cinema experience. Like, that's what going to an independent movie should be, not seeing like a clone of like a Martin Scorsese movie or something, you know, like this was pure gonzo independent cinema, and I loved it.
Yeah, like, I came out of this feeling like, one, I'd never seen anything like this before, and it has just such a unique style unto itself and a unique, like, visual representation, and, like, was just clearly so personal to the main creative behind it, Vera Drew, who co-wrote it, then also directed it, starred in it, edited it, that, like, it just seems so unique to one person's creative vision. And, like, I was literally saying as we left the theater that first night here, it was like, that was perfect. No notes. Like, I don't see how I could say, like, there was anything that should have been changed or improved upon. Like, this is unlike anything I've seen, and just such a perfect encapsulation of the idea of a trans reimagining of the Joker that's unique to one person's own personal trans experience. And, like, yeah, we came out of the theater, I should say, and immediately we were like, we need to get as many people as possible to see this again. So that was today, was our attempt to get more people to come with us to the theater, and yeah, just give it a second viewing before doing an episode on it. And yeah, I still loved it this time. Like, I got just as much enjoyment out of it, got to notice a few more things I didn't the last time, and can now say that it's not just that initial shock of seeing something so new. I'm like, that's as good as I remember it being 2-3 days ago.
Yeah, I actually, you know this, but I spent all of last night watching all of the old, from my childhood, Batman movies. Like, I did Batman, the first one, through Batman Forever. I'm going to say Batman Robin to watch it with you. But but and something you hit on too with that was it's her story, and I really love that. It's not like trying to tell anyone else's story. It's not trying to speak for everyone else. It's telling her story, but in telling her story, so many of us can recognize that story. And that's the really nice part, is like I identified, and I know you did too, with so much stuff in this movie. It's perhaps the most seen I've ever felt by a movie as far as being trans is concerned.
Like, I came out of this movie feeling like I no longer really felt any need to see Marvel or DC take their attempt at a trans narrative, because I just know anything that a major studio puts out isn't going to be nearly as faithful to it as this is, or it's going to be just so saturated for a wider audience. Like, I don't feel the need to see that because I now have this film that I feel like is maybe the best representation of like putting a creative fantasy lens over a trans experience. And like, as a trans creator of comic book related media, like, this is everything I aspire to make. Like, there's some parallels with like my It's Morphin Time coming out special I did, down to even a lot of Batman cultural, like gay Batman cultural references. But like, it's hard to put to words everything this movie made me feel. But like, I know Vera has spoken in interviews about how much of her own experience was put into this movie. She specifically wanted to make a Batman movie that was like a trans take on the Batman mythos that's like, I mean, about a trans coming of age film and mommy issues, and those are both there in spades. But yeah, it just didn't feel like every other film I've seen that does that. And it wasn't nearly as tragic as most trans films are. Like, this was just such a good representation of what it's like to meet another trans person for the first time and be seen as a trans person for the first time. Mm-hmm. And just like that journey of self-discovery through it and understanding what all this is, seeing those elements through childhood and getting the little pieces that were hints at it. And yeah, that's everything I want to depict in a trans protagonist in my own storytelling.
Yeah, and the other thing I like about it is you don't have to be a nerd to appreciate it. Like, yeah, I know more about comic books and stuff now, but other than that, I'm like a 44-year-old woman that pretty much just knows, you know, the movies. But it just speaks in honestly, you can be anyone and enjoy it. Really, at its heart, it's a really good movie about relationships and dealing with narcissism and finding yourself. It's just such a good movie unto itself, just alone. And kind of the fact that it's not trying to do any sort of heavy lifting or anything. It's just telling this really true, honest story. Like, that's what's going to make so many people relate to it. And yeah, especially trans people. It really does a good job of covering the trans experience.
As we dive into the film and that specific story, I want to say up front that we're going to do our best to avoid spoilers in this episode, or we're at least not going to take you through the entire plot and give it away. But please, if the film is screening near you, or you're listening in the future when this is available on home release, should that day come, please try and watch the film before listening to this episode, because I promise it's worth your time. Even if you're not specifically into trans cinema, like, the first showing we saw was a theater full of mostly cis-presenting folk, and they clearly got a huge kick out of this film. And I'm confident that anyone who listens to this podcast will likely do the same, regardless of your own personal gender identity. And just seeing the amount of laughs that people that presumably don't have the lived trans experience were getting out of this film made me realize, like, this is everything trans cinema should try to be when it's reaching out to even just a slightly larger audience. Like, it's clearly so accessible for even outsiders. And like, while there is a lot of good trans related jokes, for the most part, it's all jokes that the mainstream can at least be in on as well. And I think that really surprised me going into it, just because of how specific it gets the experience. There's only maybe like 2 or 3 jokes, and like, you might need to be a little in the know to get that one.
And yeah, more than anything, it's about being an outcast. And so many people will be able to relate to that. Because a lot of the other characters and her friends and stuff are just the outcast people, you know, the cool hipster outcast people that kind of you meet when you get out on your own, and it's a good representation of that as well. And there are definitely plenty of like little trans in jokes in there too, you know, for us. But yeah.
I think I would like to start out with telling a little bit about this film's story, not the plot necessarily, but more how it's come to be. Because, I mean, even in telling a lot of our friends about this, like our various trans group chats, a lot of people hadn't heard of it. And there's definitely a reason for that. I think like this has had a long, tenuous journey. I know the film actually first premiered in 2022 at the Toronto Film Festival, but only had a single screening. And for the last 2 years, almost any review that's gone up online has been about like how the reviewer has seen this trans Joker film that you'll likely never see. So it's been a pretty big deal that it's now getting a wide release across the United States, playing in like over 70 theaters, I think. And yeah, it took an additional 2 years. There was a lot of backlash from Warner Brothers around this film, clearly. Like I know they sent not quite a cease and desist letter, but still kind of a like, hey, cut your shit out letter the night of its first screening. So there's been a lot of hesitation to put it out there, a lot of talks with lawyers to make sure that this film fits within film parody law or fair use parody law. And having now seen the movie, I have to say, like, I would unequivocally say that I think that does apply to this movie. Like, even though it clearly shows Batman and like other known DC related characters, like they all look so different. You would never see them and think like, oh, am I watching Suicide Squad or am I watching a Zack Snyder Batman movie? Like, no, it's clearly like a goofy reimagining or like a fake CGI looking Batman that looks like a closer to an action figure. Like, it's just so clearly not something that's being made by the studio. Like, imagine how something like Scary Movie or Epic Movie depicts major film superheroes and characters, and then times that by 10 as far as like making it look different, making it look both cheaper and stylized to fit its own means.
Saturday Night Live doesn't get sued every time they do a Batman sketch.
Yeah, it's like more creative versions of that. And exactly, the SNL style of like skit humor is present, but usually more as the butt of jokes here, and I freaking love that in the movie.
Yeah, don't know what made me think of SNL.
Yeah, that was one thing I really appreciated about this. Like, we hear trans coming of age comic book inspired movie, and we're like, well, that's going to be a Tommy movie for sure. Like, this is her thing. But then we went and saw it, and it was like almost everything you loved growing up, or like kind of playing into that whole like huge SNL fangirl moments, and like
such an SNL fangirl. That was huge. Yeah, and that really, like, that part of the movie really touched and affected me. It's the same thing. I wanted to be a cast member, and as you grow older and realize how awful it is and how awful Lorne Michaels is, like, you're just like, oh. And that's another thing I really loved about the movie is like a lot of the things she grew up and loved, I did too. And all of those things are really cringe now. Like Woody Allen and Louis C.K. and like, and it's, I mean, these aren't things I ever mentioned that I loved. And it's really, I think, brave and awesome of her to be like, no, this was a part of who I am. And even though it's been totally tarnished and it's awful and makes me feel gross and cringy, this is a part of who I was. And that's such a big part of the movie. And that's another reason why I think like the copyright stuff is such bullshit, is it's all kind of set dressing for this different story of like who she is and all of this stuff that created her.
And I think it's clear, like, even though there's a lot of good jokes about DC characters, like, I see a lot more, like, the SNL and history of comedy influence on this film, more than anything that's like, oh, look at all these comic book Easter eggs, which they're there, and there's plenty of them, and there's good ones. But, like, I know that this project was originally pitched as, like, hey, let's re-edit Todd Phillips's Joker as like a trans coming of age film, or like do that with other Batman movies. And at a certain point, they just got they just realized it'd be easier and better if they just made their own movie. And yeah, they were right. Like, I mean, I don't know who would have seen this if it was just like a remix of the Joker or other Batman films, but this, I feel like, is going to have such a unique history and identity to itself. And I mean, this is what cult classic films are made of right here. And I mean, if it gets a home release, like, you can bet that we'll be making events out of showing this to people, because it's something that I think every trans film enjoyer, every trans comic book fan, every trans nerd should absolutely see.
Yes. And I really like, there's this certain feeling of it, of when you're trans, when you're different, you feel suddenly villainized. And especially with us, and it gets into the groomer stuff and all of that and does something really awesome with it that I don't want to spoil. But like, you feel villainized constantly. And you feel it when you're looking for a job. You feel it when you're going into the bank or whatever. You feel like a villain. You feel just people are looking at you, the microaggression, stuff like that. And going into it, knowing it's going to have a lot of villains in it. And then all of the villains are just these lovable, sweet characters who are just outcasts and shit on by society, but they're all really good people. And that's so sweet and really, really the queer experience.
Mm. Yeah, like all the little moments they show, not just with like the realizations, but like going out dressed femme for the first time, but like people not judging because they're in clown makeup, and just like finding those early excuses to dress how you want, but also get away with it. Like, I think we've all been there. Like, oh, yeah, we're just going to dress up on Halloween, or if we go hard in like more of a drag style than maybe the just trans woman style we want to be, people might give it a little more pass. Less so now. That might not fly as well now, but back when RuPaul was in its heyday, a little better.
And of course, the rich white guy, Bruce Wayne, can get away with it. Like everyone loves it when he does it, but
yeah, I feel like this is the first movie to really lean into the creepy Robin aspects, and yeah, like kind of the weird groomer side of Batman. And I'm glad to see finally a film doesn't shy away from that and like is framed in such a way that it can depict that for as messed up and damaging for kids as it is.
And in a really good, responsible way. Like, it's not exploitative. It's not used as a joke. There's some deep-rooted stuff in the Batman backstory.
The intention and how this film goes about, like, pointing that out, I think is really admirable. Like, I mean, a lot of the film is framed around the first, like, toxic relationship that awakens a lot of the trans realizations, like, between the main character, who's a bit more like a Todd Phillips meets Cesar Romero Joker, falling in love with more of a Jared Leto inspired one they refer to as Mr. J, and like literally stopping the movie and narrating to the audience like, hey, domestic abuse looks very specific in most movies, so I didn't recognize this growing up, but let me list off these signs that were there. And every time they have one of those moments that like just film language often glorifies toxic or narcissistic relationships, like the film still stops like, we will show you the list again, that isn't romantic.
I appreciated that so much.
Yeah, for like questioning people and early trans people, like I hope that getting to see a possible path you could have gone down, like I really hope this maybe helps people realize they're heading into a toxic relationship or avoiding some kind of toxic narcissistic relationship, because like one of the hardest things about that first year or so of transitioning is the first time you fall in love as a trans person. And like this does a great job depicting that, like, hey, the first person that sees me as myself is really toxic. And like, how do you feel any other way than that this is like the person for you or the only person that understands you when they're the first person that sees you? And I think this is maybe the most important trans narrative that can be out there for people early on in their experience.
Agreed. Yeah. Or later on too. And that's kind of what's really great about it. It's so far reaching with that.
Now, one thing that I think, so we've mentioned that there's like not really any film that looks quite like this, but One thing that I think will help it be classified in the future is that like this has so much of the unique filmmaking workarounds that a lot of people found during COVID. And I can't point to like specific things that multiple films have done because I feel like so many things have found different ways to go about it, but they don't play it up in this. And it took me until a second watch to really start to own in on this, but like it clearly is like a COVID period film because I know the idea for it only came in 2019, and with the first release happening in 2022, like I don't see any way that timeline works out without this mostly being filmed during COVID. And on the second watch, I started to notice that there's not many scenes where more than two characters are on the screen at the same time, or just like a lot of scenes that are just two people that are filmed in such a way that clearly these people could have been in two different locations for it. And because the way it just so drastically changes styles scene to scene, just going from like being our main human characters to the next scene, it's kind of simplistic animation. Then the next it's dolls, then back to humans, and now there's puppets. And like it morphs so seamlessly between those scenes that it gives you so many opportunities that like, oh, hey, this one-on-one interaction that maybe we can't film right now can instead just be done with voiceover. And it still feels just as emotional because now we can like play this really intimate scene with cartoons and like no one even has to like put themselves in a suggestive position, like sexualizing themselves on film, because now it's a home movies looking character that's
they look like home movies. Actually, it's really cute. And the editing is brilliant. Yeah. And the whole movie is like, even all of the live action parts, everything is green screen. And like, I know that sounds like a criticism. It is not. Like, the movie looks amazing and so different and cool because of it. Again, it's not like anything you've seen.
I think this is a really important one now, like regarding the AI art discussion, which I mean, its first release kind of predates a lot of that, but so much of the CGI in this is intentionally bad, or like it leans into it. Like the Poison Ivy, for instance, shows up and she looks like a PS1 video game character. And it actually works to the film's credit. Like they make it fit the film's visual style. And it just made me realize that like, okay, if we can do this, like make this cheap of special effects look good and fit with the movie and not take me out of it, then I really don't think we need to be taking artists' jobs away by like using AI art, or there are better workarounds we can do that don't take away from the film. And if anything, add to the film and make it clear that someone is putting their visual statement onto the film by leaning into cheaper special effects rather than exploiting underpaid CGI artists or relying on AI art.
The Batcave is the original Doom.
Oh yeah,
yeah.
And like, they cut to this Minecraft looking ass Batcave all the time. I am curious though, with all these like reimaginings of the characters, like in different styles. Some are animated, some are props, some are puppets. Eri, did you have any particular favorites from the group?
Ooh. Like, I think probably Poison Ivy. Like, it's really funny.
I do like the animated Clark Kent and Lois Lane they have, like, as news reporters through the movie. I feel like they were really on point with, like, corporate news or just, like, fluff pieces and stuff. I love their interpretation of, like, the ongoing events of the film.
That kind of had a RoboCop feel of it too, of like the news telling you what's kind of happening in the plot, and it's like really satirical. And yeah, a lot of that stuff I didn't catch until the second viewing, like a lot of the little added details that they have in the news reports and the angry radio guy that you keep hearing as well. There's a lot of little hidden details that you get the second time watching it that we both really enjoyed, I think.
Yeah, and I like that you bring up RoboCop because it does really have those elements. Like there's a lot of fake media within the media that helps with the world building. And that's another thing I really have to admire this movie on, is it does set up a very interesting world that hints at a lot of things that made this world as it is. Like they refer to these cyber wars a lot, and it's clearly inspired by like Frank Miller, like Dark Knight Returns style events, and just creates this very alternate world where like the characters we associate with as Batman villains are more almost like aspiring actors and comedians and performers. And yeah, I really like that this gave us like supervillain origin story stuff without having to go like the Todd Phillips Joker route or like Cruella or do anything like that. Like they, for the most part, you don't see them do that much like evil stuff other than like hacking a broadcast, and then they mention like inspiring crime among other people.
Yeah, they're more just fighting back. And it's totally a statement about the whole comedy is so woke now movement of like, well, maybe y'all should take a step back and let other people like do it. You know, it's so saturated right now. And this is a really good movie about taking it back, like make comedy more diverse. And it's ridiculous that that's such a, oh my God, you know, controversial type of statement of make comedy diverse, you know, and that comedy doesn't have to punch down to be funny. Like there's plenty of queer jokes in this. There's plenty of, you know, but never does it punch down. Everything's funny. It's not exploitative or gross. Like it's a great take it back movie.
And in the end, like it's fairly sympathetic, even with some of the characters that we've seen like be non-accepting in the film. Or like I really like the closure they come around to with the relationship with the mom. And yeah, like I just thought that was really beautiful the way they humanize someone who's been depicted as like a transphobe through the movie. And it doesn't justify anything she's done, but you at least like understand where she's coming from, or how like she doesn't want her son to experience the like women's oppression experience she's gone through. And like that just was so touching and like a great way to put this. Like it didn't just end with and F my transphobic parent moment. Like they didn't need to do that, but I think that's huge of them that they did.
Same thing with the narcissistic partner.
Yeah.
That actually has a really touching closure point to it as well. Which, wow, I don't see that enough. Like just because someone is narcissistic and working out their own issues and not a good person for you to be with doesn't mean that awfulness should happen to them. They should try to get better and be a better person. That doesn't mean you have to be there while that happens, you know, like take care of yourself. But yeah, it was just really nice seeing a relationship like that portrayed so well and not negatively. Like the narcissism is negative, but like it's just really good to see characters deal with that in a good, mature way.
Now, one thing that I felt related to my experience big time, like I won't go into the specifics to avoid spoilers, but towards the end, the movie caps off with like a very psychedelic ego death-esque sequence that also allows the film to tap into like the bigger cosmic multiversal aspects of superhero movies. That one, I think is awesome. They encapsulated like the full superhero mythos into one parody movie and like take it as far as you possibly can with a single character. But it really makes me wonder like how much of this trippy end sequence is part of Vera Drew's own trans journey. Because like, yeah, a psychedelic experience was huge in my own trans awakening. And I know that's fairly common with others. I've met many a trans gal that say like it was on a psychedelic trip that they started to come to terms with being trans. So like, I mean, after this, Vera Drew has to be like one of the people I would most like to have on this show as an interviewee one day. And I would love to hear all about like the specifics that went into this, and specifically that end sequence.
And yeah, that last 15 minutes is so, I think that's going to really hit trans people the most. I think that's the one segment of the movie a lot of people will be like, that was cool, but I don't really get it or whatever. Whereas like every trans person that watches that movie, I think is going to be really touched by the end and really get it. And even me, like I did not have a psychedelic experience for my coming out. Mine was just more like I'm 40 and it's about time. Like But even me, the stuff she's touching on in that last 15 minutes hit really hard in a good way, in just a beautiful way. A point that we all need to reach.
I do want to ask, like, since this gave me everything I think I could possibly want from a trans comic book movie, is there anything that you can think of that you would like to see in future comic films with trans inclusion? Like, whenever Marvel and DC gets around to including an openly trans character in one of their films, or just seeing other trans media from other comic books put to screen?
Yeah, and trans creators. I think without a doubt, this is what made this good. And, like, and it's not just trans. I mean, studios do this with everybody, of like, they don't want to replace their rich white cis people, but they'll hire them to, try to place marginalized people in media. And it just doesn't work because they don't know what stories they're telling. So getting creators to tell their own stories is really the difference. I'm so tired of the same narrative. Can we please change it up and hear other voices?
Yeah, and I think maybe that's what makes this stand out, especially when superhero movies have hit such a point of like saturation and also just like stasis, or like they bleed together so much now, especially the Marvel Cinematic Universe films. So I think seeing just such a different voice and expression brought to this world of like DC comics was so refreshing. And I hope this reception like helps turn DC around and maybe even embrace this movie, because like, yeah, this is something DC never would have made. And I think it actually is pretty respectful to everything in the DC universe. Makes jokes that like James Gunn would make any joke in this movie. And like, I bet if James Gunn saw this, he'd be like, guys, let's bump this up. This is awesome. And like, let's turn around our image a bit.
They need to take advantage of it and not can it, because it's like, it can only do good things for them, to be quite honest. It's been getting rave reviews. People love it. So just embrace that. As a studio, that's what you should be responding to, of people like this and people are paying to go see it. So yeah, ka-ching, get that money, Warner.
I would definitely agree with you that I guess like any future comic book trans representation, I just want to see trans voices given a platform. As for like Marvel and DC characters, like I guess unless we're going to get some very personalized voice brought to one of their films, I think this actually makes me feel like I just want a trans character to exist in one of these films and not any kind of deal to be made out of it. Like, I think it should be clear that they're trans and not hinted at, so we can actually get some clear representation. But it's like, this said everything about the trans experience that I need it to. So if we can just show that a character is now their current gender, but maybe in a flashback was not their current gender, and that's just about all they ever say about it, that'd be fine by me. Like, I don't see a way that Marvel or DC express one of these experiences better unless they give someone with our perspective a film like Into the Spider-Verse or something they can stylize and break the Marvel mold so much so that they can at least take a character like Spider-Man or other major character and imbue what already makes that character great with how trans people already see their own experiences in this character with two lives or two identities they're trying to balance.
And here's the representation I've seen in the past year. I got 3. So the first one is Hari Nef in the Barbie movie. That was surreal. That was amazing. I love her, and that role was adorable and wonderful. And so that was just a moment seeing that in the theater. And then the next was Monica, which is a really good artsy movie that a lot of people would probably be bored through. It's a character study and just really slow but beautiful. And then there's this, and this compared to the others, not, dissing them or whatever, but just mind blown, because those were, just little kind of tiny things, whereas this was such a wonderful, giant artistic statement from a trans person.
The third one I thought you were going to mention was going to be Monkey Man.
Oh yeah, yeah. True. And also, yeah, I forgot about that. So 4, because that also was we were like literally cheering in the theater during Monkey Man. And seeing the Hydra represented is something I've wanted to see for so long. So that was super awesome.
Yeah, like I don't know how much I don't know how much we're able to label that a trans experience, but it's undoubtedly a gender non-conforming experience because it is just culturally a very different relationship to one's own gender and transitioning. But yeah, Monkey Man's trans representation is probably going to be the best of the year. I'm not including this one since this could count as a 2022 or 2023 film. But as far as actually, officially, objectively 2024 films, I will be shocked if Monkey Man does not have the best trans representation of the year. So cool to just see this badass group of trans and gender non-conforming warrior monks, that like not being a huge part of their story, but still like, yeah, just helping represent like, yeah, we're kind of outcast, but we also are like non-dual or like can balance two different aspects of ourselves. And yeah, like I can't believe they let like the group of basically Jedi for that movie, just a group of trans monks. And God, Monkey Man's awesome. See it if you haven't already.
It's so cool. Yeah. And then back to kind of what I was saying before about trans creators, I wanted to stress to all studios and especially Warner Brothers, y'all leave Lana alone. Let Lana do whatever she wants. Don't make Lana direct like a trans Batman movie or something.
We're talking Lana Wachowski?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
It's like, oh, trans thing, we'll get Lana. Like, no. Let her do whatever she wants.
And now, before we get into like suggestions for other films for those that like this, do you have any final points about the movie you'd like to bring up?
Yes, I do actually. Something we have not mentioned yet, and was just one of my favorite parts of the movie. And I can't believe I'm saying this, but the penguin.
Yeah.
Like,
oh my
what
gosh.
a good little ally. Wow. Like, what an awesome ally. And they're out there. And I'm glad there was some good cis ally representation because he is so sweet and wonderful. And most definitely my favorite character in the movie.
Yeah, he is the cis friend every trans person wants to have at their side. And like, just given that it is the penguin, when he first showed up, I'm like, oh, this is going to end badly, or they're going to have some terrible falling out. He's going to betray the Joker, the Harley Quinn. But no, he's a solid dude throughout. He's a real stand-up guy. He's really supportive of like Joker expressing the way they want and pointing out like, have you seen this group of outcasts that you live with? Like, no one's gonna care if you show up with makeup on. Like, embrace it. And yeah, like they are absolutely ally goals. And like, I know we're in, I guess, a period of great penguin representation, or like we keep getting great penguins in our Batman related media, and this is no exception. Like, he's got some of the best jokes, some of the best moments in the movie, and such a lovable character.
He's just such a lovable character. Yeah, like I don't know why I love that character so much, but I do. He makes me happy whenever he's on screen.
Anything else?
I think that's it.
So I did want to have just a moment where we talk about like other films that people should see if they really liked this movie. Like, obviously nothing's going to scratch the exact same itch, but I think there are some very creative, subversive takes on common media, or just weird indie films that I think people should check out if they like this. Eri, I know that there were like a lot of like artistic and indie directors that you kind of recognized their style in this movie, especially like with the use of dolls and puppets in some parts. I am an uncultured swine that didn't know any of those, so I thought I'd kick off and ask for like who you would say, like, if you like this weird avant-garde filming style, filmmakers and films people should check out.
Yeah, and make sure to check out all of these people's early work, because a lot of them kind of like their work is completely different and in studios now. But like one is Todd Haynes. He did the Karen Carpenter story, one of the great seminal queer filmmakers. and he did the Karen Carpenter story all with Barbie dolls. And not like they're all weird Barbie dolls. Like they've seen better days, these Barbie dolls. And that's a really fun one. Very mixed media like this. Another Greg Racky is very much like this, especially his early stuff. He's actually he directed a lot of episodes of Riverdale recently, so he's come really far. But yeah, a lot of his early stuff, Doom Generation, Nowhere, Mysterious Skin is really good, but that's kind of when he started being a little bit more of a standard filmmaker, but still a great queer film. And then yeah, those were the two big ones I was really thinking of. Oh, and Gus Van Sant, My Own Private Idaho, very much has the same kind of grainy, independent feel to it.
Mm-hmm. Now, the first one I'll suggest, take with a grain of salt, because we won't see it for another week or two, but there were a lot of trailers ahead of this one for the film She Is Conan that really intrigued me and had me really excited to check that out when that gets screened at the same indie theater we saw The People's Joker at. Like, yeah, it seems to be like a gender-bent reimagining of Conan across like 6 different time periods, but with following one female barbarian. And it also looks very like hyper stylized and unlike anything I've seen before. Like, I get that they're calling it Conan, but this has very little resemblance to any other Conan the Barbarian media we've seen in film so far.
If you want to have some fun, go on IMDb and look at the current comments on the She Is Conan page, and it's all bros who are just like, this is not Conan, not fair. It's like, what would make you think? Like, I saw this trailer, and like, if I was a Conan bro, I would know to stay away. Like, and I love Conan too. Like, don't get me wrong, but like, yeah, I know I'm in for a lesbian movie, and I'm very happy about that.
Now, the other one that comes to mind for me that I just think all queer people should check this out, at least if you're not like easily offended, but Dix the Musical has some elements of this. Like, this is the other film that we've recently made an event out of showing our friends, just because it's without a doubt the funniest movie I've seen in a very long time. It does some similar stuff with the like intentionally cheap effects, even as a recurring theme of things being fake and shitty looking. But like, I mean, it's gay people playing over the top straight people and like doing a caricature of like straight cishet bro mentality like at its worst. So yeah, like it does get offensive, but like at the expense of like the most toxic aspects of like straight guy culture. So like, yeah, if you're easily offended or like off put by subversive humor, maybe not for you. But like, yeah, if you are missing good comedy movies and want a good queer one at that, like this will not disappoint. Our friends were literally crying at this, and we had to watch with subtitles. Otherwise, a lot of jokes would have been missed. We were laughing so loudly.
It's a great movie. I love Sewer Boys.
Now, for a closing question of the week I have for this episode, I wanted to ask you, Eri, what other comic book or intellectual property or other big series or franchise would you like to see subverted in a similar fashion, potentially also integrating trans themes?
Ooh, that's a hard one because I'm not the biggest fan of that. And honestly, that's why I was kind of like, didn't think I would like this movie as much as I did. But wow, that's a tough one. You always pop these up. And it's like, because it's a hard one to answer because like normally I would answer my first one would be like the Batman villains because they've just always seemed so queer to me.
Do you want me to go first to give you a minute to ruminate on that?
Yeah, I think I have my answer now, and it's really silly, but go on.
So, I mean, every time I come across Terminator media, my mind just races to all of the places that franchise hasn't gone yet, or like has only dipped its toes in, and usually not very well. But like, I really want to see something where Skynet is depicted sympathetically, and like maybe there could be some level of trans allegory to it, or just like identity. Maybe you could follow a T-1000 that like, yeah, that's literally gender fluid, gender liquid steel. But Terminator Genesis is infamously like the worst Terminator movie, but I think it has some of the most interesting ideas of any of those films, because it does just weird stuff that doesn't feel like a Terminator movie. And I really think that maybe only got the Terminator label late in its production because of it. But the idea that like, hey, maybe Skynet doesn't have to be a bad guy. Like, every time it's killed humanity, it's been on, like, its first day being sentient. So maybe if we keep delaying Judgment Day and keep letting technology progress, and maybe let Skynet take shape in other ways, maybe it can be our friend. Or maybe there's, like, a better outcome for both of us. And, like, yeah, if you're gonna have... If you know something is coming in the future, you can prepare for it and steer it in the right path. And like, yeah, it is. I don't even know how in the wrong Skynet is in at least the later films, when like it's, yes, sending people back in time to kill John Connor, but it's also defending its own existence. And like, I mean, isn't that the least anyone can expect of like a sentient being, especially one that like was programmed to kill people? Like, yeah, maybe like Skynet doesn't have to be the bad guy. I would love to see something of like Skynet and John Connor kind of becoming one, and that was something Genesis touched on, and I felt like could have been really interesting. But sadly, it was just done in such a like unrealized way, or like something that felt closer to Terminator fan fiction than like a real exploration of where that franchise could have gone.
Yeah, it did really feel like Terminator fan fiction. There were parts of it that were like hit so hard and like things I'd always wanted to see. And then there was the rest of the movie, which was off. It's some of the worst casting I've ever seen. But so I have mine. It's a big one. And first, I'm going to tell you the runner up I had in my head, which I still really love, but it's not my final answer. Trolls. I just think Trolls could be more queer. It's already pretty queer, but I think you should just queer up Trolls even more. Because come on, Trolls, we all know. Just come out.
You're basically a pride flag, as is, Trolls. Like,
yeah, you're a giant pride flag for kids, and I love you, Trolls. Don't stop being you, but be your true you, Trolls. So having said that, no, I wanted to put a kind of FU edge on it. And my choice is Harry Potter.
Yeah.
Actually.
Yes.
Yeah. Take it back. And like, just, I mean, she obviously can't do shit with it. Like, so just give it to someone else and make it queer as hell and trans it up, because it already lent itself so well. I mean, they literally have potions that I dreamed about. And I can't say as a kid because I was an adult when those came out. But like the potions and stuff where you change what you look like and your gender and stuff, like, come on. You could so trans that up. Like, get that mischief map out and just trans that whole Hogwarts.
And I mean, in a very similar style to the People's Joker, there is a production house that I would like to see do this. It's StarKid Productions, I believe they're called. They're who did a Harry Potter musical and its sequels, which is the only Harry Potter related media I can really suggest, because it's unofficial fan media, and like J.K. Rowling, or at least the powers that be, are against it enough that the only recordings of it are clearly like not professional on like a phone or a hand camera. Good enough to watch, but not good enough to like release widely. And they make great musicals out of all these properties, doing really original thoughts out of like Oregon Trail or Aladdin, but like with Jafar as the good guy. So I would absolutely trust them with like maybe a trans guiding hand of doing a trans reimagining of Harry Potter. And I mean, Daniel Radcliffe seems like such a cool person. If they could get him into it, I would love that.
Yes.
But yeah, just wrapping up here, I just want to say thank you again, Eri, for joining me for this episode. It's always a pleasure having you on.
Thank you. It's always a pleasure being on.
If the listeners at home have requests or recommendations for comics or other comic-inspired media you'd like us to cover in the future, you can send them our way on social media. You can find us on the Transcending Comics Instagram and Facebook page. On Twitter is @TranscendComics, or email us at transcendingcomics@gmail.com. We'd like to thank you again for giving our podcast a chance, and give a special shout out to Ray Day Parade for designing our logo. Our intro and outro music this week is A Little Soul and You've Been Starring by Carlson. You can check out more of his music on carlson.com. Join us again next time as we continue transcending boundaries and exploring the colorful world of trans, non-binary, and genderqueer representation in comic book media of all kinds. As the curtains fall in this episode of Transcending Comics, remember that comics have the power to inspire change in countless worlds, including our own. Keep reading, keep writing, and keep transcending.